Thank you for joining me for this navigation or exploration number 3. This is Kusujiro. Today, I will talk about Henry Cockeram's English Dictionary under the title The Historical Significance of Cockeram's Treatment of High-Frequency Verbs, which is based on my presentation at the international conference at UC. Section 1, Introduction. Henry Cockeram's English Dictionary, 1623, is the third oldest dictionary of English, following Robert Cottere's Table Alphabetical, 1604, and John Bullokar's English Expositor, 1616. It is widely known that Cockeram's dictionary is comprised of three parts. The first part of the English dictionary being for interpreting hard words, and the second part of the English translator for providing the readers with information on how vulgar words and phrases can be replaced by refined terms. Concerning the second part, Cockeram himself stated as shown in the reference with number 2. In this passage, we can clearly see Cockeram as the first lexicographer of a word-finding dictionary, a type of dictionary which often requires its author to elaborate head words or head phrases. With this recognition in mind, I will, in my presentation, investigate entries in the second part whose head phrases are related to verbs of high frequency. This is because when browsing through the second part, we can notice how much Cockeram was interested in the use of such verbs. For instance, he provided 27 entries in succession whose head phrases include the infinitive and inflected form of take, as to take out, to take away, and the taking out of. Besides, in performing this practice, he is regarded as not having often referred to, or rather having hardly referred to, the English-Latin dictionary as the one included in John Ryder's Bibliotheca Scholastica, 1589, which had usually been thought to be an essential reference book for Cockeram to compile the second part. In this situation, I will analyze 139 entries in the second part whose head phrases Cockeram specifically related to the 14 verbs of high frequency, which are shown in the handout in the reference with number 3. Here, the figures in the parentheses indicate the number of relevant entries. In these 139 entries, Cockeram provided 178 of his refined terms, and for the purpose of conducting verification of Cockeram's uniqueness in the entries, I will also investigate the relevant situations in the three books I have mentioned: the Bibliotheca, the Expositor, and the first part. As to the order of my analysis, I will firstly investigate the source of the relevant entries in the second part in section 2, and secondly, two types of traces of Cockeram's creative and unique practice in respect of verbs of high frequency in sections 3 and 4. Section 2, Sources of Relevant Entries. On what preceding dictionary was Cockeram's second part based on? It seems to be generally agreed, as far as I can judge, that the answer is Ryder's Bibliotheca. For instance, De Witt Stans and Gottfried Neuen once made remarks shown in the handout with reference number shown in the slide with reference number 4. Aiming to justify this opinion, they provided some 20 sets of examples in which entries in the second part were juxtaposed with their counterparts in the Bibliotheca. The two sets of entries indicated in the handout by reference number in the slide by reference number 5 are two of them. At first sight, the effect of such examples is quite convincing. However, as far as my scope of analysis is concerned, Cockeram apparently neither copied head credits in the Bibliotheca nor anglicized Latin word in it so often as Stans and Noyes claimed. In terms of refined terms, Cockeram based himself on the Bibliotheca concerning no more than 61 of them out of the 178, representing 34.3%. This is because the other 117 refined terms clearly have no relevance to the English-Latin dictionary. The fact which has been revealed here may seem to largely contradict Stans and Noyes' opinion, which I quoted earlier. Here, there may arise a question about my selection of the edition of the Bibliotheca. As I mentioned in section 1, I refer to the first edition of the dictionary, which was published in 1589. In Stans and Noyes' case, they also used its 1617 edition, which was reissued by Francis Holyoake, as well as its first edition. Would the result of my analysis so far have been different if I had also used the 1617 edition of the Bibliotheca? As for me, I have to respond negatively to this question. And further, I also have to remark that as far as the entries for high-frequency verbs are concerned, it was not necessary for Cockeram to often refer to the Bibliotheca. This is because such entries in Cockeram's second part are widely and strongly influenced by the first part of his dictionary and Bullokar's Expositor, making it almost worthless to conduct an analysis limited to examining the influence of the Bibliotheca on the entries. That is, when providing entries related to verbs of high frequency in the second part, Cockeram's basic practice was inverting the headword and definition of entries in the first part and the Expositor, transforming the headwords into definitions as well as the definitions into head phrases in the second part. Naturally, this also means that quite a few of the reference terms within the range of my analysis are nothing other than headwords in the first part and the Expositor. To be specific, concerning 112 entries out of the 139, or 80.6% of entries of analysis in the second part, we can see the traces of inversion of the headword and definitions of entries in the first part and the Expositor. However, it should be noted here that in many entries within the range of my analysis, Cockeram did not simply invert the headwords and definition of the entries in the Expositor and the first part. Out of the 112 entries in my sample, in which inversion did take place, only 50 show direct verbatim inversion. In the other entries, we can clearly see that traces of Cochrane having exercised his ingenuity, especially about their head phrases. They are, namely, his unique and creative use of infinitive and inflected form of verbs, an indication of phrasal verbs. This can be regarded as the first performances in the history of English lexicography, whose significance seems to have been unnoticed until today. I will analyze the 2 points in the following sections respectively. Section 3. Use of infinitive and inflected forms of verbs. Cochrane often provided multiple entries to list the derivatives of refined terms as well as the root word. This led to his unique use of infinitives and inflected forms of verbs of high frequency in the head phrases of the second part. In some cases, such infinitives and inflected forms of verbs may apparently be a natural reflection of Cochrane's reference to the expositor and the first part as seen from the 3 sets of entries in the slide, which is indicated by reference number 6. However, at the same time, there are cases where it is evident that Cochrane exercised his ingenuity in the conjugation of verbs, consciously providing entries to list derivatives and root words of refined terms. These cases are found in 2 types of entries. 1. Entries which are explicitly related to other entries, and 2. Entries which are based on but not explicitly related to other entries. In the following, I will discuss the 2 types of entries one by one. And 1. Entries explicitly related to others. One case of Cochrane's unique use of infinitive and inflected forms of verbs can be seen, for instance, in the 2 sets of entries from the second word, which are indicated by reference number 7 in the slide. In each of these 2 sets of entries, Cochrane's wording of the second entry links to the first one. In the first set of entries, Cochrane began with the root word precipitancy and then transformed the head phrase of the gerundive phrase with the indefinite article into that of the infinitive with to, using the adverb so to relate the second entry to the first. In the second set, he conversely changed the head phrase of the infinitive phrase with to that of the gerundive with the indefinite article to list a derivative of repudiate, and this time related the second entry to the first by using the adverb thereon. 4 other entries within the range of analysis are similar to the second one in each of the sets of entries above, as indicated by reference number 8 on the slide. There are taken away thereof, are taken one so, the which is so taken, and what is taken in such consideration. 2. Entries based on, but not explicitly related to others. In investigating the other case, where Cochrane conjugated verbs in head phrases to list the derivatives and root words of refined terms, I want to begin with solving a mystery in the set of examples indicated by reference number 9 on the slide. In this set of entries, the head phrase to take out in the second part can hardly be regarded as being based on the definition in the expositor and the first part. And with rhythm, the second part treats the word abstract as a verb, while the expositor and the first part the same word as a noun. How then did Cockeram come to list the word as a verb using the infinitive phrase with to as the head phrase of the entry? Reference to the Bibliotheca does not provide an answer. Its entry to take up or choose only this decimal as its Latin equivalent, which Cockeram could never have referred to. A key to the mystery is to be found in the set of entries shown in the slide with reference number 10. It is evident from this that Cockeram provided the entry for to take out based on that for a taking out on, transforming the head phrase or the gerundive phrase into that of the infinitive, and deriving a verb from the word abstraction. Cockeram does not register the word abstract as a noun in the second part because his interest there is in providing refined equivalents for common words rather than registering whole families of refined words. Cockeram performed this practice here and there in the second part. It can be detected in the 11 sets of entries indicated on the slide with reference number 11 within the range of my analysis, in addition to the example I already cited. Section 4. Use of phrasal verbs. Cockeram very frequently abbreviated and modified definitions in the expositor and the first part in providing head phrases in the second part. However, he did not perform this practice only to shorten such definitions. That is, Cockeram's way of modifying the definitions in the expositor and the first part reflects his interest in idiomatic phrases, especially phrasal verbs. Concerning nearly half of head phrases in the second part of my analysis, specifically 67 head phrases out of 139, there or include phrasal verbs. Such head phrases can be classified into two groups. The one concerns phrasal verbs with transparent meaning, such as go back and throw down, and the other those with non-transparent meaning, such as put out, meaning extinguish, and run away, meaning flee. Out of the 67 phrases, 48 are or include the former type of phrasal verb, and the remaining 19 the latter type. And it is not coincidence that a high number of head phrases in my scope concern such phrasal verbs. In the following, I will aim to show this fact, focusing my attention on the case of head phrases concerning phrasal verbs with non-transparent meaning. With regard to this type of phrasal verb, the set of entries indicated in the handout in the slide on the slide with reference number 12 will serve as one example to prove Cockeram's interest in them. Here, it will be clear that Cockeram consciously selected cast to combine the word with back, disregarding the word turn, throw, and shoot in the entries of expositor and the first part, although his criterion of this choice is not clear. If I cite one more example, the set of entries with reference number 13 on the slide concern the phrasal verb set against. In this example, it will be clear that Cockeram disregarded the object in the expositor and the first part, choosing and modifying the phrase in the expositor to set one thing against another to provide the head phrase to set against in the second part. The traces of such practice of Cockeram, which concern phrasal verbs with non-transparent meaning, are detectable in the head phrases of such entries as 14, as well as I indicate on the slide with reference number 14. With regard to the case of phrasal verbs with transparent meaning, Cockeram provided such entries as 15 to cast out, pulling away, to go before, and taking away, as shown with reference number 15 on the slide. Okay. Section 5, Conclusion. As far as entries related to verbs of high frequency are concerned, Cockeram, in most cases, instructed how usual phrases, not words, can be expressed in refined terms. In this sense, part of the definition of the word-finding dictionary by Reinhard Hartmann and Gregory James, which is quoted at number 16, a type of reference word which supplies word for meaning would be well applicable to entries of my current analysis in the second part. When the head phrases of relevant entries are analyzed from this viewpoint, we can clearly see how Cockeram was interested in conjugation of verbs and listing phrasal verbs. Besides, in performing the practice, he was far from thoroughly based on the dictionaries preceding the second part. And as far as I can judge, this is the type of practice which is usually thought by authorities to have begun with Johnson in the latter half of the 18th century. The opinion by MacDermot and Rosamund Boone, which is quoted on the slide with reference number 17, seems to reflect this situation. However, we may now safely regard Cockeram as the forerunner who treated the usage of verbs of high frequency as described in MacDermot and Moon remarks here. However primitive his technique may have been as compared with Johnson. And Cockeram performed this practice in the first half of the 17th century, the heyday of the dictionaries of Harvard, and more than 100 years before lexicographers as well as grammarians became seriously concerned about problems in English grammar. This is the bibliography of my presentation. And this is also the bibliography of my presentation. Thank you for joining me. If you find the topic this time interesting, it is expounded in detail in my paper as you see.